In this module, we are going to discuss how a research problem affects the further steps of research. Suppose you are interested in a broad research question, that is to study depression, and you want to conduct a research study regarding the services available to patients with depression living in a community in a developing country. Now, you have a focus to find out what type of services are available to patients with depression. And if that is the case, the study you would want to explore in order to understand what types of services are available to patients and how are patients accessing those. So you can predominantly to answer such research question would be a qualitative study. If it is to understand the extent of use of these services, then in terms of the number of people using the services, it would be more quantitative study. Here, you want to find out the extent of use in the population under consideration. If you want to determine the extent of use of these services with respect to some personal attributes like the gender or in terms of socio-economic status or maybe type of religion and so on. If such a relationship have to be established between them, then this study could be a correlational study in order to understand that how the type of services being utilized is related to some personal attributes of the patients. Also, suppose if you study, this is from one of the classical studies where the user engagement with real-time feedback was studied in terms of engagement with the energy conservation activities. So the three research question was, how do participants interact with feedback provided by the in-home display for energy conservation, which are devoted for energy consumption displays? What factors might cause the different levels of engagement with the display among participants? And the third one was, what are the preferences and the needs of households concerning the electricity display services? If you examine the three research questions here, all three suggest that in the first instance, we need to understand how participants interact with the feedback. So it's an exploratory study. That's what the question how was brought in. It makes us that the study is more amenable to a qualitative viewpoint. The second aspect is what factors. We have no idea about the factors which cause different level of engagements. So again, it's an exploratory study, hence a qualitative viewpoint would be the most appropriate. And the last one talks about what are the preferences and the needs of households concerning electricity display. In these cases also, the preferences and needs of households are not well defined, and hence qualitative study would be the most appropriate study in this particular for this particular research problem. Another study which talked about household energy and climate mitigation policies, in, in investigating the energy practices in households. So, in case if a researcher wants to investigate if the household energy depends upon individual resources, example, income. Now here the resource is defined, whether it is income, whether it is education, tangible income or non-tangible income like motivation to use. So once you define the resources, then you can associate it with respect to the household energy use, which is also a quantitative variable. So such a study will be more amenable to a quantitative viewpoint because the resources are defined, which can be operationalized, and also in terms of energy use, which could be a quantitative variable. So the relationship among them could be quantitatively explored. This brings an end to this particular module.